Our world can be a desolate and draining place. It can steal our hope and leave us running on empty. But then there are those people who live in the same world, yet they're hopeful. They have what seems to be an unshakable confidence in God, in spite of what they've seen, in spite of what they've experienced, in spite of what's happening around them. They don't have amazing beliefs. They have amazing faith. So where does that come from? And how do we get it? How do we rediscover and refuel our faith in a world that's running on empty?
So how many of you know that there are certain things in life you really shouldn't try to do alone? You know what I'm talking about? Certain things in life, and have you ever discovered something that falls into that category when it was maybe a little too late? Like you're thinking, I got this, I don't need no help, I don't need nobody, until you realize, I don't got this. I don't got this at all. Maybe I do need some help. So let's say you have to reach this really high up place on your house, but your ladder doesn't get up that high. No problem, right? You just stick a stack of table on top of a table and put your ladder on that. And I got this. I don't need no one to hold the ladder. I don't need a spot. Like, what could possibly go wrong with this scenario? That right there looks like an ER visit to me. That's what that looks like. Or let's say you're moving and you're carrying really heavy items from a third floor walk up down to the ground, and you've got like this really big TV. Like I'm talking old school TV. But you got this. You don't need help moving because you're going to wrap the TV in a tarp and lower it to the ground. I got this. I don't know if you've ever done this, like let's say you're weightlifting and tough guy here is going for his personal best. And you know when you're doing a PB, first of all, you don't need a spot and you're gonna videotape it. And so he's videotaping himself doing his PB and he's like, this is all me. Like I got this. I don't have a problem with this until he does it. And guess who he calls to for help? Right when you think he still has his man card. Right there. Because there are certain things that you really shouldn't do alone, that maybe you can't do alone. You definitely shouldn't try to do alone. And honestly, there are a lot of things I think that fall into that category, a lot of things in life that we probably shouldn't try to do alone, that we can't really do alone. And yet we do, or at least we try to do them alone or in isolation all the time. And faith is actually one of those things. So today, as Scott just said, we're wrapping up our series, Faithful, Fueling Your Faith in a World on Empty. And we started this series making an observation a few weeks ago that you've probably known people or met someone or seen people at least who had what seems to be unshakable, robust, like vital, life-fueling faith. And you may not have much faith of your own. In fact, you may not even consider yourself a religious person. Or you may, if you were honest, you may have a faith that comes and goes, that ebbs and flows sometimes with the tides of life. There are times when you feel real close to God and you're faithful, feels strong, and then maybe there are other times when you just feel distant from God and your faith almost feels non-existent. But you've maybe seen people, or maybe you've known people who had this robust, like energizing faith no matter what happened around them, no matter what happened to them or to one of their own. Like they had a confidence in God. They had a trust in God and who God is and what he might do even in and through the worst of times, that God is good and he's always up to something good, even when things aren't necessarily good. And so consequently, they're resilient. They're resilient when the rest of us are wondering, like, how are you still standing right now? They don't just have amazing beliefs, they have amazing faith. And so the question we've been asking in this series is, Where does that come from? Where does that come from, and how do we get it? And we've been looking at a document that's part of a collection. It's actually a letter that's in a collection of documents known as the New Testament. This letter is known to us as the letter to the Hebrews because it is written to Hebrew background or Jewish background followers of Jesus who happen to be in a community in the city of Rome circa mid 60s, and this group of people, they have undergone a series of terrible, life-altering events. Back in 49 AD, about 15 years before this letter is written, Claudius, the Emperor Claudius, actually expelled, we know this from historians, expelled all Jewish people from the city. And so this community, most of them lost everything. They lost their properties and their houses and their businesses and so forth. And then in the mid-50s, Claudius died and they were allowed to return. But then in 64 AD, a terrible fire swept through the city of Rome, destroying 2/3 of the city. And according to the historian Tacitus, the Roman historian Tacitus, the Emperor Nero, in order to deflect the increasing suspicion that he had actually started the fire in order to rebuild the city of Rome, Nero placed the blame for the fire on these Christians. And so Christians are now being routinely rounded up and killed in horrible ways. And so some of them have now fled the city. Some of them, we know from history, have escaped to the catacombs beneath the city. And some, specifically this group of Jewish background followers of Jesus, were tempted to just recant, to just back off the whole thing and throw in the towel. And so the writer of this letter, who's anonymous, we don't know who it is, writes this brilliant sermon letter. It's a speech or a sermon written as a letter, challenging their faith, challenging them, to pleading with them to stay the course, to stay true, to trust God, to remain faithful. And towards the end of his letter, and this has been part of the theme of the letter the entire time, towards the end of the letter, he gives us like a definition or a description, and then a series of case studies about what he is talking about, what faith is and what faith isn't. And contrary to what we may have thought about faith, here's how he describes faith: that faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance, or even proof, you might say, of what we do not see. It's not feelings. Faith isn't feelings. It's certainly not blind beliefs. It's not counterfactual thinking or counter-evidentiary thinking. It's not a fiction that I try to convince myself of or a formula that I have to figure out. And it's not a force that I can harness to get God to do what I want him to do. Faith is confidence in who God is, and what he says he will do. Faith that God is confidence that God is, not in spite of evidence, but because of evidence, and in who God is, and that he will do what he has promised he will do, that he will be faithful. But faith is not just a feeling of confidence, it is vitally more than that. It is acting upon my confidence. That's what the faith is. Faith is the action, the acting upon my confidence in who God is and what he says he will do as I begin to orient my life and all of my life choices based on that confidence in that direction. Faith is like this state of mind and really a state of being. It's like a state of existence that ties a reasonable person to an expected outcome such that they behave positively in light of that which has yet come to be. Or you can put it this way: I am confident in what will be, which I have yet to see, and I act accordingly. That's what faith is. I'm confident in what will be, which I have yet to see, and so I act like it. I act accordingly, which is where the writer of Hebrews goes next. He says this kind of faith, this kind of confidence, this kind of acting upon or acting accordingly is what the ancients were commended for. And then he just goes on to give case studies, like example after example from their own history, from their own story, names and stories that they would have known from childhood, that they would have known inside and out, like men and women who risked great things. Each one of them, here's how he puts it: by faith, each one by faith, they did something. They did something often counterintuitive, confident in who God was and what God said he would do. And in the past couple of weeks, Josh pulled a couple of these stories out for us to focus on. Two stories that serve as case studies for how faith, this deep, vibrant, honest, intellectually honest, emotionally honest, healthy, resilient faith actually grows. Like, how do we get that? And the first story we looked at is the story of Abraham, who's actually referred to often as the forefather of our faith. Abraham, who left his homeland and left everything he had ever known and embarked on this iconic journey of faith to a land where God says, I'll show you when we get, I'll tell you when we get there. Like, and that was enough for him. In fact, here's how the writer of Hebrews puts it. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as an inheritance, obeyed and went. Put one foot in front of the other. By faith, he did something, though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. To a stranger, listen, to leave your roots, to leave where you are known, where you actually have identity, where you're somebody, to be a stranger in a foreign country where no one knows you, where you have no identity, that was not done in the ancient world. It wasn't done, and it was not safe. And again, throughout the scriptures, there are these stories. Scholars sometimes refer to them as call narratives that illustrate this principle that faith grows when we are stretched beyond our limits. Not to our limits, but beyond our limits, beyond what we're comfortable with, beyond what even we are able to do. If God doesn't show up, I'm toast. Beyond what we're able to do, because we believe that that's what God wants. That's what God wants, and so that's what I'm going to do. And the kind of faith that we're talking about in this series, listen, it does not grow. It cannot grow in the comfort zone. It only grows when we're being stretched beyond our limits. And then last week, we looked at a story that the writer of Hebrews only mentions briefly, the story of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, a.k.a. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and how they resisted what had to be just overwhelming pressure to compromise, to fit in, to go along, to get along, right? And they had every reason to do that. After all, in the ancient world, in the ancient way of thinking, when your team lost, your God lost. And so their God had already been beaten by the Babylonian God, and they had every reason in that environment to go along in order to get along, though they resisted, though they knew resisting meant the near certainty of immediate death. And Josh talked about how it was likely not their first act of resistance. And faith, listen, faith, this growing, vibrant, healthy faith, it always involves that. It always involves acts of defiance, that faith grows through acts of defiance, like through constant, I think dozens maybe of everyday choices, great and small, to trust God, to obey God, to do what Jesus would do if he were you, to love others, to truly love them, to be more generous than you would ever expect to be, to forgive. Forgiveness, oh my goodness, forgiveness is an act of defiance. Did you know that? Apologize when they were just as wrong as I was, an act of defiance. To pray, to worship. Worship for me is almost always to some degree an act of defiance against my emotions in the moment, against my struggles, against things that I'm going through, against a defiance of our cultural moment and cultural voices and social media and social norms, against my own internal voices, right? And the things they're rattling around in my head. Faith is an act of defiance. Faith is the great nevertheless. Nevertheless, not an act of denial. Denial is a whole different thing. This kind of faith we're talking about is honest, sometimes brutally honest. And in fact, we see this in their story, right? It's like, yes, I see that it could turn out that way. And maybe it will, but nevertheless, it is so, dare I say, punk rock. So the writer of Hebrews is given I love it, right? All these case studies, and they're so good. And then at the end of like a dozen or more of these examples that he gives, by faith they did something, he just goes off. He goes, I don't even have time. Like I'm running out of room on this scroll to tell you about Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah and David and Samuel, the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, gained what was promised. They shut the mouths of lions. They quenched the fury of the flames. That's our boys. They escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. I'm like, yes, that's awesome, right? That's the sweet spot right there. That's where we want to be, just crushing it, hashtag winning, right? And we love those days, and we love those seasons of our lives when it feels like we're doing the right things and all of the right things are happening because of it. It's like, that's amazing. Let's keep some of that juice going. What you got next for us, writer? Yeah, there are others who are tortured. It's like, wait, what? That doesn't sound fun. Yeah, refusing to be released that they may gain an even better resurrection. There were others who did not have a happy ending to this part of the story, but they weren't living for this part of the story because they knew that this wasn't the end of the story. There were some who faced jeers and flogging and chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning, sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins because they had nothing. They were destitute. Things were not going well for them, persecuted and mistreated. And we're like, well, they must not have been living right. They must not have been believing right. Trusting the promises of the Lord, amen. Then they would have been victorious, but God had clearly abandoned them, or maybe they had abandoned God. And the writer says, oh, no. No, it's just the opposite of that. You see, this world, this fallen, messed up world, it was not worthy of them. They were too good for this world. They endured in spite of, they trusted in spite of, and then as he's reached this kind of crescendo, he gives one more case study, one more example, and this time he brings us into the story. You ready for this? This is so key. He says, Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, or literally, here's how the wording actually goes. Therefore also we. There's this person and there's that person, and now there's we. Being surrounded as we are by such a great cloud of witnesses, like all these heroic men and women who acted upon their confidence that God was with them and for them, they are now like spectators in an arena at the games, and they're watching us. They're watching us. They took their turn. They ran their leg of the race, and now they're saying, it's your turn. It's your turn. And they're leaning forward to see what we're going to do with it. He says, since we're now the ones that they are watching as they're cheering us on, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. He's like, let everything and anything that gets all wrapped up around you and all tangled up in you. Specifically, he mentions this thing called sin, which we often around here define simply as everything that's messed up in the world. Everything that's messed up in the world and everything that's messed up in me. Everything that's messed up in the world and everything that's messed up in you. And like, that's a really big category of stuff, right? And if you have even a little bit of self-awareness, you know that the stuff that's messed up in you gets all tangled up around other stuff. It just gets all tangled up around things that we're not even watching or noticing in ways that we're not even aware, affecting our responses and our reactions and our words and our emotions. He says, let us just actively and constantly be discarding that. Let's discard that and get rid of all that, and like athletes going lean and mean, and let us run with perseverance the race that's marked out for who? Who is that? It's us. A race that's marked out for us. In other words, there's a race that lies before us collectively. There's a race that lies before us collectively. The race of faith isn't just a race for me alone, not even a race for a collection of individual me's. It's a race that's for us. It's communal to its core. Let us run. Not let you, not let me, not let them. It's an us thing, a we thing. And now for a segment I like to call Fun with Grammar. Turn to the person next to you and say, grammar is fun. Grammar is fun. You're having fun already, right? So, fun with grammar. This letter, in fact, all of the documents that are found in what we call the New Testament are written in ancient Greek, not in English. We translate them into English and lots of other languages. And there's a verb form in the Greek language called the hortatory subjunctive. Let me hear you say hortatory subjunctive. Brilliant, brilliant. A hortatory subjunctive is like a first-person plural command. Think about that, a first-person plural command. Now, the English language only has second-person imperatives or second-person commands. You may have never thought about that, but now you know that grammar is fun, and you're like, hey, that's really true. That is kind of fun. All commands, think about it, in English are implicitly second person. Hey, do this, go there, stop that. Who am I talking to? You. Either singular or plural, right? We don't have a way of commanding we to do anything. We don't have a way to command them to do anything. They're not even in the room. But Greek actually, the Greek language actually has a way of creating a first-person plural command for us, like a way to say, hey, do this, but to us collectively, like we're gonna do this, we're in this together, right? And in English, the only way we have to translate this kind of a verb is with the phrase let us. Let us do that. Like, hey, we're doing this and we're doing it together, so let's go, right? And that's the mood that this writer has created through the entire letter. In fact, there are more hortatory subjunctives in the letter to the Hebrews than anywhere else in the New Testament. Throughout this letter, there's this sense of we. In fact, if you were to skim or just scan through the letter to the Hebrews, it'll take about 2 minutes to do it, and put a little tick next to every we or us or our, you will see that this is the vibe, the tenor of the letter. It's all about us. That like, if we're gonna do this, guys, because they're faced with some challenging things, if we're gonna make it through this, the only way to do this is we. We're in this together because faithfulness is not just a me thing, it's a we thing. Let us run with perseverance the race that's marked out for who? For us. Now, the way he ends this whole section on faith actually takes us back to the way he set the whole section up in Hebrews 10, though he didn't write with any chapters. Those got added later, and thank goodness it makes it a whole lot easier to refer to these things. But at the end of this section, right before he starts talking about what faith is, he uses these hortatory subjunctives, these first-person commands, 3 times in a row. And here's what they are. Let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and full assurance that faith brings, and let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful, and let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up being together, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. 3 things, he says, that we do together, that we must do together, 3 things that happen as a we, as an us, that can't really happen the same way as me. The first thing he says is we draw near to God together. We draw near to God together. In fact, we are made, there's so much in brain science that points to this, to discover and experience and draw near to God and be transformed by God in a we, together and not just alone. And one of the best things you can do to deepen your faith, to grow the kind of faith we're talking about in the series, is to surround yourself with some people who are drawing near to God, with sincere hearts and full assurance of faith, and they surround you with that faith when you don't have that faith for yourself. We draw near to God, and we draw near to God together. And he says, and we hold on to hope together, because life can beat the hope out of you. Am I right? I mean, just any given day and any given week can suck the hope right out of you. And when that happens, we need a we. We need a we around us to remind us that God is faithful, that he isn't surprised or shaken by the things that have surprised and shaken us, that he is with you and he is for you. We need a we to hold on to hope with us. And sometimes we need a we who will hold on to hope for us when we just don't have any. We need a we to draw near to God with, a we to hold on to hope with. And then he says, and then let's consider how we can spur one another on, or you could translate that to provoke or to like fire up one another. We stay fired up together, kind of like coals in a fire. We contain heat together. We keep each other hot together. And I don't know if I'm sure you've seen, red hot coals in a fire before. I don't know if you've ever taken some tongs and pulled one of those coals out, but if you had, here's what you notice. The coals are actually keeping each other hot. They're keeping each other collectively, they're holding the heat together. And when you take one of those coals out of that fire and set it to the side, what happens? It cools off like that. It just loses its heat. Put it back in the fire, and it sparks right back up again. And that's us. That's us. And so he says, so don't give up on, don't give up on being together, because you hold the heat together, but encouraging one another, and all the more. We need a we to stay on point, to stay white hot, to spur us on, and specifically, he says, to spur one another on towards love and good deeds, because those don't come natural. Character is formed through group identity. Did you know that? Our character is formed through group identity. Your brain, especially your right brain, is completely wired this way to define your internal sense of self in relation to others, in relation to the tribe or to your attachments. Character is formed and transformed through group identity. Listen, content can be consumed individually, but character is cultivated in and by community. Content, yeah, we can download content into our brains all day long. It can be consumed individually. But character is formed and transformed and cultivated in and actually by our community. So whatever your tribe is that you surround yourself with, that's what will be spurred on and shaping inside of you. And there's so much definitive research on this topic. In fact, James Clear, in his excellent book, Atomic Habits, many of you might have read this, he unpacks this whole idea, and he says, we all have this deep, primal desire to belong. It is hardwired into your instincts. We care about what other people think of us despite our protests. I don't care what anybody thinks of me. Lying to ourselves. We care about what others think of us, and we imitate the habits and the behaviors of the people around us. We take our cues and our definition of what's normal from our tribe. People like us do things like this. People like us love and do good deeds. People like us do things like this. And so he gives a bunch of examples. He says, so if you hang around a bunch of jazz musicians, playing music 5 nights a week will seem normal. It's not. But it'll seem normal to you, right? If all your friends are successful entrepreneurs, starting a successful company and all the habits and sacrifices that come with that, it'll just seem normal. That's what people do. Hang out with a bunch of people who want to have a great marriage, who are talking about it and working on themselves towards it and committed to that. Well, then that'll just seem normal. Start partying with all your divorced girlfriends from high school, clubbing and dancing and drinking every Thursday night, girls' night, then leaving your husband because you don't need to put up with that anymore. That'll seem normal. People like us, we do things like this. And then he draws this conclusion, this application that's so important for us. So here's what he says. Here's what you want to do. You want to join the group where your desired behavior is their normal behavior. You want to join the group where your desired behavior is their normal behavior, because we imitate the habits of and the character and the behaviors of the people around us. By choosing your tribe, you end up choosing your habits. By choosing your tribe, you end up choosing your character and choosing your outcomes. It's the proximity principle. The proximity principle goes like this. Here's how he concludes it. In order to do what I want to do, I need to be around people who are doing it in places where it is being done. In order to do what I want to do, in order to go where I want to go, I need to be around people who are going there in places where that is being done. In order to become the kind of person I really want to become, I need to be around people who are becoming that, in places where they are becoming that. And the writer of Hebrews knows this. It's the tenor of his entire letter, that faith grows in a faithful tribe. It's the only way it grows. Faith grows, and faith grows full in a faithful tribe. That's how it grows, and that is where it grows. So he says, so let us draw near together. Because if you're in a tribe that's drawn near to God, you will draw near to God. Let's hold on to hope unswervingly together, because if your tribe is holding on to hope, let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Because if your tribe is doing that, then you are going to have love and good deeds shaped in your core. Faith grows full in a faithful tribe. The journey of faith is a we thing. The race is a team sport. And so as he reaches the climax, this litany of case studies he's given us, he concludes by saying, therefore also we. Now it's our turn. Therefore also we, being surrounded as we are by such a great cloud of witnesses cheering us on who've been there and done that, let us throw off everything that would get in the way of that and the sin that gets so tangled up in us, and let us run with perseverance the race that's marked out for us. And then he gives us his last case study. He says, fixing our eyes together, not on our circumstances, not on our people who've hurt us, or the diagnosis we or a loved one just received, or what we've lost. Fixing our eyes not on all the things that have gone wrong, in spite of, maybe even because of the things that you were doing right. Fixing our eyes collectively on Jesus. We're going to run this race, and we're all going to be fixing our eyes on Jesus, who he says is the pioneer and the perfecter of faith. The pioneer and perfecter of faith. The beginner and the completer. The one who blazed this path before us, who walked this path himself, doing the right thing, being faithful to his Father and who he truly was in this fallen, messed up world that crushed him for it, who's walked this path before us and now stands at the finish line, arms wide open, ready to receive us when we finish the race together. And then he says something that we can't even imagine. What he says next, no one had ever said before. And we can't imagine because we've never seen a crucifixion. We've never smelled a crucifixion. And he says, let me tell you something about the tip of the spear, my friends. Let me tell you something about our pioneer who, for the joy set before him, endured the cross. No one had ever said that about a crucified person before, who for the joy set before him endured the horror, the shame, the utter disgrace, the violent torture of crucifixion, who for the joy of what would be on the other side, endured the cross, scorning its shame. Oh, I love that. I love that. Scorning its shame. Is that all you got? Is that all you can do? Is that your worst? Listen, when you see what's on the other side of this ain't nothing. Scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God, quoting Psalm 110 there, vindicated, victorious through, on the other side of. And then he says two powerful words, drawing us back in, drawing them back in. He says, consider him. Fix our eyes, all of you together, fixing our eyes on him, pondering, reflecting on, thinking deeply about him who endured such opposition from sinners, from messed up, broken people in a messed up, broken world, even though he was doing the right thing. In fact, because he was doing the right thing, who blazed this very path before us and now waits for us on the other side. Consider him. Fixing our eyes on him who endured such opposition in this messed up, fallen world, so that you do not grow weary and lose heart or lose faith. Faith grows full in and through a faithful tribe. Faith grows full in and through a faithful tribe, a tribe that draws near to God with you and draws you near to God. A faith that holds on unswervingly to hope with you and sometimes for you. A tribe that keeps those fires of faith white hot, spurring you on towards love and good deeds because people like us do things like this. A tribe that runs the race with endurance with you and keeps you going to the end. The race of faith is run together. It's run together. And if you want to become a person of inspiring, unshakable, robust, resilient, life-fueling, emotionally healthy, mature faith, the most important thing you can do is to be a part of a community that's doing that, that's running in that direction, because faith is not just individual. It's communal to its core. It's tribal. And so today, as we wrapped up this series, we thought, what better thing could we do than to celebrate something that in many traditions is called the Mass or the Eucharist or the Lord's table. We call it communion, and I love that language. We call it communion because that's what it's about. What we're about to do is about our communion with God, but just as importantly, it's also about our communion with each other. In fact, this thing we're about to do got started with a group of people at a meal. And for the first decades of the early Jesus movement, it was always celebrated as a group of people having a meal together. It was communion. And so around the room, you'll see there's these tables. There's one back there and two up front. And on them, you'll see there's bread and juice. There's also some sealed packets that are gluten-free in case you have an allergy. And the bread and the juice, they represent this sacrifice of this redemptive act of love that frees us, that forgives us, that restores us, that reconciles us, that brings us back to God and to each other. And when we're receiving communion, it's like we're taking that inside ourselves. And just as when you eat that bread and drink that juice, your cells, as you digest it, will be metabolizing that into every part of your body. So too, when we're doing this, spiritually, what we're wanting to do is we're just wanting to metabolize that act of redemption, that act of forgiveness, fixing our eyes on the tip of the spear. We're taking that on inside ourselves as we run together. And so as the band leads us in a couple of songs, I'm going to have us stand and sing. And when you feel ready, just get up and make your way to one of those tables. And as you take that bread and juice, maybe you just might make it your prayer, God, I want this to be a part of everything in me. I want your love freeing me, redeeming me, setting me free. And maybe today as you receive that, you would open your mind and heart and life to receiving that love and renew your commitment to being a we that draws near to God together, that runs the race of faith together. So if you're not standing already, let's stand together and let's draw near to God together. And then when you're ready, let's receive communion together.